One, two, three.
Welcome to Scéalta. My name is Joe Austin. I was trying actually to find a label that would encompass all the things that my guest tonight is and has been involved in. But let me give you this just as a simple introduction. When a dub meets an islander, there's going to be trouble. So my guest is a combination of a dub meeting an islander, and it's Frances Black. Frances, welcome to Scéalta.
Thank you, Joe.
And you're looking brilliant, I have to say. And I know you have a very stressful time trying to juggle all the things that you're involved in. We're coming from the Colony Centre, which you helped open a wee while ago, and you've done that rendition of Connolly. I think more people came to hear you singing than they came to hear most of the speakers. So, welcome back, if you like, to the Colony Centre. I was trying to find a way of just kind of giving a sense of all the things that you're involved in, and it's impossible. We only have an hour, so we're going to skate across the surface of most of them. But let me just say, to begin with, that you're a wife. You're married to the wonderful Brian, and it was Brian that told me to say you're wonderful, that he's wonderful, and you're wonderful. You're a mother. You're a mother of two, and we talk about them. Talk about the children whenever you're ready to do that, and you're involved with a multitude of different things. So maybe just to tease them out, let's begin. I said a dub meeting an islander, which is quite from Rathlin to Dublin. How did that come about? What was that combination?
Well, my father is an island man. He's he left Rathlin around, I think it was in the 30s, and he travelled all the way down through the glens of Antrim, serving his apprenticeship as a plasterer, and landed in Dublin. And he met my mother there, and she's, a real dub, inner city, tough Dublin woman. God love him. He didn't know what hit him, to be honest with you, I'd say, because he was a very quiet, gentle soul. But I'd say he liked the fire in her, and I think he really liked, the music in her as well, the singing, that she was a great singer. But so I suppose from our perspective, as a family, being born and reared in inner city Dublin, Charlemont Street and the tenements, we were really lucky to be able every summer to go up to Rathlin Island for our holidays. I know my parents didn't have a huge amount of money. And in hindsight, I actually think that it was my aunt and uncle on Rathlin who would have maybe sent down the train fare for us to all go up, or certainly subsidised it. So we were really lucky to have these amazing summer holidays on Rathlin Island, where you'd be working on the farm with my uncle, and you'd be doing the hay, and you'd be milking the cows, and my aunt had a little shop down, the lower end of the island, and we were really lucky to have, and to this day, I feel like Rathlin is my home, even though I'm born and married in Dublin, and I'd be a proud Dubliner, but I still feel Rathlin is my home, my spiritual home, I suppose.
And you may not remember this, but I spent the weekend at one of your events in Rathlin.
How could I forget, Joe, in fairness? Well, I never forget you.
But I have to say, like, just watching you, and we done a gathering on the second night of Islanders, and we kind of intermingled and all of that. But you certainly went up a gear. You certainly, just as you say, you mightn't live there every day of the week, but your heart's there clearly every day of the week and twice at Christmas. And you sang in the manor house, and it was a fantastic evening, and the moon was coming down, and there's all of that there. Is there something, and I suspect that there is there something that is special about island people?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think, they're very spirited and determined people. They have to be. I mean, island living is not easy. Now, I know maybe these days it's slightly better, but it's still tough, Like I know when we were growing up on Rathlin, even going over in the summertime, the seas were treacherous, and there would be times in the summertime that the boats wouldn't be going. And I know as also in the winter time, there would be weeks and weeks, and it's different now, obviously they've better boats, but at that, in those days they had very small boats. The seas were really crazy. I mean, up there for some reason it's particularly bad. So they'd be cut off for weeks and possibly months on end, and they'd have to find a way. They're very they're amazing people. They really know how to survive in tough times. And like, they only got electricity in the 80s when you think of it. I mean, and the water, proper water system has only gone in as well in the last 20, 30 years. So like, they have, when we were growing up, like on Rathlin, they just had generators. And I even remember a time when they didn't have a generator, where it was just, candles and lights and little lamps and stuff like that. So they're very resilient, tough people. And they would have, my father would have often spoke about how they would kind of entertain themselves with going around to different houses. And my father's family would have played music on the island, and they would have went around the different houses and play cards and sing songs and maybe have a little dance, and and that's the way they entertain themselves. But they're very also, they might have their own little fights within the community, but by God, they're very unified and they stick together, and you wouldn't want to cross them because they all stick together. Do you know what I mean? So
I suppose to a large extent, that's how they survive. It's that sense of. And one of the things, that I heard you speaking about was, although the decline in the numbers of residents of Rathlin has been addressed, and I think it's one of the very few islands off the coast of Ireland where the population is actually increasing.
Yeah.
But there was almost a sadness that when you became, for instance, secondary school, you went across to Ballycastle, or if you had a job, it wasn't going to be on the island, it was going to be somewhere else. And maybe from your own father's point of view, like Dublin, it must have been, if you think about him, from that community of Rathlin, almost been able to touch the shoreline in every direction, and you arrive in that city called Dublin.
Yeah.
It must have been some experience.
Well, you could imagine, and my father, he was offered to, by uncles or great uncles in the US and in Australia as well, to travel over, because most people had to leave Rathlin. I mean, there was 8 of them in the family, and only one of them was probably going to get the farm at the end of the day, so the rest of them had to go off, and a lot of them, would have been builders, and the women, some of the women became teachers, and maybe my Aunt Maggie, she was a housekeeper for one of the priests there in Loughin Island in County Down. But my father was offered a ticket to go to America, and he really didn't want to leave his mother. His mother was, his father had died when, of a heart attack when they were very young. All the children were very young. And she was an amazing woman. She was actually from Ahadui in Derry. And she had, married an islander. So you can imagine, she was only, I think, 19 at the time, or 20. She was living on an island. She had 8 children. She lived with her husband, but then he died, massive heart attack, when he was in his early 50s. So she was on her own, and I think her husband's father, which would have been my great-grandfather, was I think he wasn't reliable in the sense that he would have liked his few jars, and so she really was kind of taking care of him and then looking after all these kids. And so, my father was very close to her, and he didn't really want to leave and go off to America or Australia, because he knew he'd never come back. So that's why he chose, he as I say, he travelled, he served his apprenticeship in the Glens of Antrim, down Cushendall, Cushendun, all around that area, ended up working in Belfast for a while, and then came down to Dublin then in the 30s. And that's where there was a man who had, he was a foreman who worked on the buildings here, and he was an Antrim man, and he said, come down and I'll give you a job. And that was it, really. Sorry, I hope I'm not waffling here now.
No, you're far from it. the music in the family, you spoke about your mother singing and your father playing. I think he played the fiddle and he played
Yeah,
the mandolin.
the mandolin, yeah.
So and of course your sisters and brothers had musical talents, but you were the most talented. I also heard this is part of
That's
our
why
own.
I've always loved you, Joe.
This is our own research. I heard that you were spoiled. Someone said she was spoiled rotten. That's what happened. She was spoiled rotten. I suspect you probably were. But was it always going to be the case that, whether professional, semi-professional, or talented amateurs, were you destined to be in the music business?
I don't think I ever was destined myself. It never was something that, as a child, people dream of. I probably, was the least, I would have considered myself the least musical of our family. I would have never have thought myself as a singer, to be honest with you. Like my eldest brother, Shay, he was the one that really kind of inspired us, to be honest with you. Like my parents were musical, and my father brought down the tradition of the sing-song to our, definitely. So every Sunday night, my father would bring in the neighbours, and they'd all have to perform, sing, tell a joke. Even if people were shy, he'd say, well, look, you have to tell a joke or you have to say a poem. If you don't want to perform from a musical point of view, you have to do something. So, and in a way, we all had to, my father was a really gentle soul, but he always would insist that we all sang or did something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there was always a sing-song, but it was really my brother Shay who inspired us all, to be honest with you. And he bought his first guitar when he was 13. He saved up for months. And then Michael picked up the banjo, so he's next in line. Mary was always destined to be a singer. I mean, she was the soloist in the choir even when she was in school. I mean, she has, the most amazing, powerful, beautiful voice. And then my brother Martin picked up the fiddle. And the four of them started a band, I wasn't in the band.
Was that the Black family?
Yeah, but they started up, like, I was still kind of in school. I was probably a bit wild, to be honest with you. And, they couldn't probably handle me, to be honest. So they kind of all headed off to the US and did some gigs over there. And when they came back, they were planning to do a small folk club tour around Ireland. And I was very close to the eldest brother, Shay. I would have looked on him like, as my hero type. So I pleaded with him for me to go along with them. But really, I only wanted to hang out with them because they were all so cool. Like they were all older than me. And to me, they were like just really cool. And, and I just wanted to hang out. And Shay said, look, maybe you'll get up and sing a song and sing one song, in the folk club. Whatever folk club it would be. So I would get up and sing and they would all sing with me. It was amazing. You just have to sing a couple of verses and then all of the voices would come in behind you. And when you have your brothers and your sister singing with you, it's a pure magical experience that I haven't really experienced that feeling musically when you're singing with your family. The closest I would have done it was with Ciarán Goss. But it's powerful, it really is powerful to have your brothers, your three brothers behind you singing. It's almost like they're lifting you up on a wave and they're carrying you. That's what it feels like, or you're on a cloud or something. And that's how I'll be really honest with you, Joe. I mean, I just my dream was to be, a Montessori teacher or something. I wanted to work with children. I always had that thing in my head. I wanted to work with children. And because I really connected well with children and animals. I wasn't great with adults, And so I suppose music then, that's when I got the bug for it. And I really loved singing with my family. But I didn't think any more about it. Then we were offered a record deal, Black Family, and we brought out an album and that was brilliant. We'd done really well. And after that, I just presumed, I had two small children at the time. I was in my early 20s. I just presumed that was it. But then I got a phone call from Johnny McDonough, who was in a band called Éireann from Galway.
Yeah, of course.
And Johnny was starting up a band and he asked me, would I be the singer? And that was very scary for me because, you know, I would be kind of going out on my own type of thing. I mean, I'd be with Arcady, but, you know, I wasn't going to be with my family. But I did it, and that was an amazing experience. And, you know, I joined the band. And
I actually think you've been too modest, I have to say. I mean, not my opinion, but you have a beautiful voice, a wonderful voice. So you have a voice like Francis Black. That makes any sense. It's
Yeah.
unique to you. I asked someone when we were kind of trying to get this together, and I have to say to you, thank you for taking time out of, I was going to say a busy schedule. It's a hectic schedule, and people as we go along this interview will understand why. So thank you for doing that.
Great.
But I was asking them about you, and they said, well, you know, knowledge is not enough for Francis. Francis wants to do. Francis always wants to do. So you can tell her as much as you want, but the second question is, when are we doing it? What are we going to do? When are we doing it? So I suspect that you weren't just someone who sang in a band. I think your involvement in the band was, our bands or singing was just not simply as casual as you're suggesting. But we'll not fight about that. So, you know, you two young children. Aoife has followed you into music, I think, and she's a reputation which is leaps and bounds. Was it an undue pressure between trying to get it right as a singer, trying to get it right as a mother, trying to raise children, or is these things that you look back on going, you know, that they were busy times or hard times or difficult times? Were you aware at the time that you were trying to juggle turn and singing?
No. You don't even think about it, to be honest with you, Joe. It was almost, I suppose, you know, you're given an opportunity, and my mother was always of, you know, the belief, when you're given an opportunity, you take it, you know, big time. And particularly around the music, I think, for her, because there was always this, I suppose, thing in her. She would have loved to have been a singer, you know, a professional singer.
Yeah.
She was had an amazing voice. And I think, so the minute that I was given this opportunity of joining, you know, Arcady, she said, and my sister Mary's both said, you have to do this, you know, we'll support you, you know. And of course Brian was there too, and I just had an amazing support system, Joe. But I never thought, you know, I never thought it through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it just happened for me. Things just happened. They just came in front of me, and as challenging as it might have been, and I would have always been a little bit fearful of taking on challenges. You know, everybody is, but I took them because my mother said, if an opportunity arises, you cannot not take it because of fear. So I took it, you know, but none of it was planned, none of it.
Sometimes these things fall into place for a reason. So I want to just keep moving you on, because we're trying to cover so much in such a short space of time. Your politics with a small p were always there. You were always someone who's seen a better way of life as a possibility. You were someone who had always been mindful of other people's, not necessarily on the island of Ireland, but wider, their needs and their difficulties and all of that. And this came through in your conversations. And I'm not saying that you were a crusader, but I'm saying you were always mindful of it. And people were always mindful that you were mindful of it. And I want to cover your incredible work around the Palestinian people. But if I can, so 2 children, and we have St. Brian looking after you and them, and then you're moving forward. There was a dark period where things just kind of came, and I suppose not unsurprisingly, just came to you. You took a decision at some stage and somewhere that you wanted to be a counsellor, that you wanted to go back to, you know, and this is at the height of your musical career, that you want to go back and you want to study, that you want to become a counsellor, you want to reach out again, you want to help. You couldn't have done it without Brian's support, I would imagine, without words into your mouth. But was that another of your leaps into something that just had grabbed you, that was there to be done?
Yeah. I, left school when I was 16, Joe. And and I left school because I often think, I don't know, did I have some kind of dyslexia or something? I really struggled in school. So my mother passed away in 2003 and left us a small amount of money, after she passed away. And I wanted to do something, I suppose, that would make her proud. I mean, don't get me wrong, she was proud, she was proud of us all, but I just wanted to do something different, and I wanted to give back. I suppose there was a burning fire in me to just give back somehow, And even though I would through my music, you meet amazing people, and people after gigs come up and tell you their stories. I just wanted to do something that would be more fulfilling for me. So I've spoken very openly about my own recovery from alcohol. And that was like in the 80s. That was before I had even contemplated joining Arcadia at that time. So that was back in the 80s. But I wanted to make a difference, and I decided that I would go back to college and study about addiction, and just try and I honestly just went to college to try and understand it, to be honest with you, and the power it has, and the power it has, particularly, alcohol has in Ireland, and the legacy that it can leave behind for many people, and the devastation it can cause, and how people can choose alcohol over their families, and why is that, So I went back to college, I studied, I ended up working, I kind of, as part of my college course, I went to work in the Rutland Treatment Centre, and then they kept me on there as a therapist, and it was there that I met family members who have somebody they love with an alcohol, drug or gambling problem. And what I realised was, Joe, that family members who have somebody they love with an alcohol, drug or gambling problem are often as distraught as the person in addiction. Yeah. If you're watching somebody going down that self-destruct route and you can't help them, it's almost like you're watching them drown, and you can't help them. It can bring you into a very, very dark place, and it can bring you into a place of complete and utter destruction, and depression, anxiety, stress-related illnesses. So what I decided to do then was to leave the Rutland and set up a separate organisation specifically for families, so as that they would have a team of therapists, looking after them, guiding them, and helping them in their distress. The same way as people in addiction have a team of therapists looking after them, I wanted to do the same, but solely for families. Like, addiction is a family disease. The whole family are impacted, and family don't even have to drink or take drugs to be impacted by it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So that's why I set up the Rise Foundation. And that has brought me on one of the most incredible journeys I've ever been on, Joe. And I did it because I wanted to help others, but it's really kind of brought me on an amazing journey in my life. And it's what Rise that brought me into politics, really, to be honest. I was always, as you know, kind of involved in politics on the outskirts in some way, but,
the way you describe that, first of all, I identify with everything that you've said. I've been there, and to a large extent, I'm still there, so I identify easily with all of that. And the point that you make is addictions hit a family like an exocet missile, and people are left to pick up the pieces. And Rise is ideally placed. And I watched you when we were on Rathlin, and I watched you with Rathlin Islanders. And there was a wee bit of concern that there's strangers coming onto the island, and they mightn't know the unwritten red island rules. But you like a LAN or a LAN-S, you kind of defended the people who you're now talking about needed that help, and you persuaded, and you were influential, and you done all of that. It must be a very draining. It must be something that, it's not like driving a taxi where you lock the door and you go home and that's it. This is something that I suspect, looking at you, Brian gave us a great expression that he said, when you don't want to kind of talk about being under pressure, you go, I know, which means that you're doing whatever you want to do anyway. But it must be tiring, physically and mentally tiring, to try and look after people and worry about them. And I'm not talking about your own family, I'm talking about all these families. And do you manage it well, or do you relax yourself?
To be honest with you, Joe, I actually find it very rewarding. I don't find it exhausting. I find when I'm working with families, it just brings me to life. It makes me, and it's the families really help me, to continue to stay on my journey of recovery. They are inspirational. They are inspiring to me. They keep me going, on my word of honor. I feel so blessed that I'm able to work with them, that they allow me into their lives, that they allow our therapists into their lives. They open up their hearts and souls to us. They share their deepest and darkest concerns. They would have never shared stuff with anybody else in their lives before. They're able to look at their own, I suppose, addiction can bring out the worst in us. So they're able to look at their own flaws and name it and work, and are prepared to work on it. And that's what inspires me about our family members, and every single one of our therapists say the same. They all say, Frances, we love this work. The programs are powerful, and then the one-to-ones. And again, I don't think I could say anything has ever made me feel as happy. And I know that sounds really strange, but I feel completely like, the song, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Rise for me is, I have found what I'm looking for. That is what I was meant to do on this earth. And I love every minute.
That's a wonderful feeling. Before I go on, I've been ordered, not even asked, ordered by PJ, who was on the island with us that particular time, to say hello. So actually,
hello back.
PJ says hello. I want to talk and move you forward and move you on to your, I know you say, and you were, of course, peripheral to politics during the hunger strike and the particular periods of oppression and all of that. You were a voice, sometimes a voice in the wilderness, but you were a voice for people. The decision to stand in the Senate, another one of these cliff leaps, how did that come about? Did you just, I know you were asked, but did you just?
Yeah, somebody had said to me, Frances, you should think of running in the Seanad campaign. And I laughed. And it was actually somebody, when I was on a walk on Rathlin Island, it was at the Rise Rathlin Ramble, we were walking, and somebody said it to me. I think it might have been Lucilita Brannock actually had said it to me initially. And then I laughed initially, and then a few other people said it to me. And then I think it was when Brian said it to me, I thought, oh my God, like, he must think I'd be able for it. You know what I mean? That was a bit of a shock. And I thought, look, I had nothing to lose. I was frustrated as well, Joe, with, I suppose, the lack of supports that the likes of Rise and other NGOs were getting from the government. And, we were constantly, we're constantly firefighting with funds and stuff like that, and we do great work, so there was a kind of so that was one of the reasons I thought, if I could get in there and be a voice for the families and be a voice for those who don't have a voice, and I know everybody's kind of cliched and everybody says that, but I genuinely wanted to get in there because I know what it's like to be in recovery. I know the importance of addiction services. I know the importance of family recovery. It's vital, and it breaks the legacy. It can break the legacy big time. So I decided what I would do is just run in the campaign, genuinely, honest, on my word of honor, thinking I probably won't get elected, but I learned from it. I learned from this experience. And you see, I don't believe in the word failure, because I think my family were really worried that I was going to run in this campaign and then not get elected and be heartbroken. That's not the way I think. I think, I don't believe there's such a word as failure. I believe one door closes and another one opens. That's always been the way it has been. And I think, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And that's okay. But I learn, and I'll educate myself. To my surprise and delight and honour, I got elected.
Twice. You've been elected
twice. Second time was a bit harder, but twice. Yeah. And I think I was probably in shock for the first month, to be honest with you. I really was in shock. still remember the next day after being elected and walking through the corridors of Leinster House and expecting one of the, the guys in there, the porters, to come up to me and say, "Excuse me, what are you doing in here? Get out." Do you know what I mean? It just felt so weird. And but honestly, again, as I said to you, Joe, it has brought me into a place of where I can really work on social justice issues that I'm extremely passionate about. And, there are many, as you know, there are many social justice issues that I'm extremely passionate about. So I do my best, Joe. That's all I can say to you. I do my best.
And I suppose from a point of view of, as you say, the many campaigns that you're involved in, the many lobbies that you receive on a daily basis, let alone longer periods, that there's enough to be keeping you going. There's more than enough to be keeping you going, and children and brand and all of that. But that wasn't enough for you. So you end up adapting the Palestinians. Rightly so, I have to say, and I'm glad, of course, glad that you did. But you have fought what is a magnificent battle in the public and also in the Seanad around the question of the Palestinians. Just tell me, not why the Palestinians, but just tell me how that caught your imagination.
Yeah, well, look, I've always been very conscious of what's happening to the Palestinian people. Who hasn't in Ireland? Everybody knows, so when I got elected, I got a phone call one day, and I was asked would I consider becoming the chair of the Friends of Palestine cross-party Oireachtas group. And of course I was honoured that somebody would even think of me, bearing in mind I'm not, political minded or whatever. So that was the beginning of it. And so I would host meetings, and I would invite, I would hold briefings. I would invite politicians in Leinster House. And then there was one briefing where Mohammed from Gaza came in. And even though we all know what's going on in Gaza, but you don't know until you really hear the everyday gory details. And I remember looking at him, and I just felt, at that time, I felt hopeless is the only word I can say to you. And I just felt, oh my God, what can we do to help, these people, these amazing spirited people? That's just, anyway, I actually said to Mohammed that day, I feel so hopeless. And a woman who was there said, she sat in the corner of the room, and I'll never forget what she said. We must never give up hope, ever, and we must keep, working on helping and supporting the Palestinian people. So it was there that Jerry Liston was at that meeting, and Jerry Liston had been talking about, maybe thinking about doing a piece of legislation on the occupied territories, which is a bill that would ban goods from the illegal settlements in the West Bank. So we had a chat, myself and Conor O'Neill, who worked with me in the office at the time. He was my parliamentary assistant. We had a meeting, and Jerry and Conor sat up for hours and hours and hours till 1 o'clock in the morning for many days, putting this bill together. And then they got they got opinions from people like Takis Tridimus, and just incredible piece of work they did. And I introduced it into, so really what it is, sorry, I'm going into a different thing. What it is it's a piece of legislation that what we are aiming to do is to ban goods that are coming from the illegal settlements that under European law is breaking the law. They're breaking into these settlements that are being built on a daily basis is breaking international law, but there are no consequences. So this bill would be around, this would be the consequences. So we refuse to take goods into this country from the illegal settlements.
And I have to say, in your own understated way, you just didn't invite people to attend a meeting. You lobbied, you embarrassed them, you talked to them, you done all of the above.
Yeah. Sorry, that was just a phone call coming in there. Can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. It was just a phone call coming in. Yes, I worked very hard, and you know what? it was an incredible journey. What I did was, I had public meetings around the country. I could not believe the amount of people that turned up at those public meetings. And I got those people who came to all of those public meetings to lobby their local TDs and their local senators and their local reps. We got motions passed in county councils all over the country to support it. And to be honest, we were delighted that eventually, we got Fianna Fáil on board. Obviously, we had Sinn Fein, the Labour Party, the Green Party. They were all supportive of it anyway. People Before Profit, Solidarity, Rise. They were all supportive of it. Social Dems, and we just needed to get Fianna Fáil on board, and we did. We got Fianna Fáil on board. So it passed many stages, and we only had 2 more stages to go before the election was called. And unfortunately, the current government, their position had been very cautious. They decided to not put it in the programme for government. But look, it doesn't really matter, because the way I see it, like other EU countries, they're overwhelming focused on at the moment. There's an overwhelming kind of thing around halting annexation, and we have to keep that going. We have to keep that momentum going. The bill is not gone, Joe. The bill is not gone, and I need to say that. And I intend to continue to work extremely hard on it. We're hoping to invite Takis Tridimus in to do a briefing in Leinster House, and he's one of the top lawyers in Europe. And he's the one that gave us his opinion. So we're still working behind the scenes.
And parallel to that lobby of the bill was a politicization, a mobilisation, an education for lots of people in all arts and parts of Ireland about the plight of the Palestinians. So, I mean, there was a parallel track. One was to inform and the other was to act in terms of the bill. So much so, of course, that those who don't wish the Palestinians well recognised Ireland as one of the leading defenders of Palestinian rights. So, I mean, it's far from it going. And in fact, George Mitchell, my memory serves me right, you got a very, which again you skipped over in your own intrepid way, you got a very prestigious award.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Well, the Arab American Institute in Washington, they're quite a big organisation, and Jim Zogby would have worked as an advisor to Obama, and Jim Zogby has now become a friend of mine, but he was the one that put my name forward for an award, and I went over to Washington, and it was given to me by the biggest, I suppose, honour I had was that George Mitchell gave it to me, and I'm a huge admirer of him, and I know he's done great work on the peace process along with many others. So it was great. It was lovely, and it was just lovely to be given an award and being recognised. So it was lovely. It was lovely.
We mentioned your 2 very talented children.
Yeah.
So tell me about them and about where they are.
Yeah, well, my son Owen is a musician also, full-time musician.
Of renown.
Up until March of this year, as you can imagine, that was his main earning. He's now, as you know, unemployed, as is Aoife. Both of them are musicians. I suppose Owen is studying for a PhD at the moment, and fingers crossed, it's a tough time. He's 2 small children, so it's hard to try and do a PhD and look after 2 small children in these very tough times. But they're two little girls who are the highlight of my life. Absolutely adore them, Kitty and Winnie. I have to give you their names. And Owen, I'm very proud of Owen trying to get through this PhD in this really tough time, and then the fact that he has no gigs, so it's tough. Aoife, my daughter, as you know, full-time musician, singer-songwriter, had worked tirelessly for the last probably 8 years on building up a kind of a reputation, and had released an album in January, and this was going to be her busiest year. She was going to be going twice to the US. She had 2 tours over there. She had been booked for many Irish festivals. She was going to Australia. She was going to be in Germany. She was going to Austria. And this was probably the first year where she was going to actually earn a few bob. And, unfortunately the rug was pulled out from under her with COVID. So yeah, it's pretty hard, and she continues to try and get her name out there online, but it's very difficult when you're trying to make ends meet and you're living from hand to mouth, So yeah, I'm proud of them both, and they are very resilient, determined children. They're not children, they're adults now, but they're amazing. Very proud of them.
They'll always be children to their mother.
I know, yeah.
And are you a hands off or hands on with regards to music? You don't kind of go, well, I would do it like that, or do you leave it alone?
I have to be so careful, not to. I really try and button it. I really do, And look, I realised many years ago they have to go their own journey, And I know there are decisions that Aoife have made that I may not have agreed with, and she would have always, it was always the right decision for her to do, and I'd be amazed, and it would be my fear, you know what I mean? I would have more fears around her, getting hurt in some way.
Do you know what I mean? Sounds a bit like you when you were younger, but anyway.
Yeah, she's tougher, I think, tough cookie, but she is, she struggles with, confidence as well, and it's a tough business, Joe. It really is a tough business. You're putting yourself out there to be criticised, and, and every gig you do, you don't know if people are going to turn up, and there's always that anxiety, and you don't know if people are going to like your music, and you write a song and you put your heart and soul into it. It's just really tough. So I wouldn't have wished it for them to take that, to be honest with you, because it is a tough industry. But Aoife has done really well, and hopefully it will continue.
This pandemic, globally, but in Ireland, and there's so many part-time musicians or people involved in the arts or people involved in small, nearly community theatres and all of that, and they got badly hammered. Now, there's been some respite recently with money that's came and it's gone to the arts, but I mean, it's just a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
Can I ask you about Ireland Forward and where you are in that campaign, and maybe for those that wouldn't be familiar with it, just explain what it is or what
Ireland's Future, yeah. It's a group of citizens who have come together to really talk about, Ireland going forward and a shared future and how we see it. And, in my view, like we all know, and they all feel this as well, that the threats posed by Brexit, they've raised so many real questions, about our constitutional future. And it's a really important time now, because we know there's a possibility, a very strong possibility of a border poll. And we, feel that we have to start opening up these conversations. So Ireland's Future are a group of fantastic, amazing, civil society people, Jerry Carlisle, Niall Murphy, Martina Devlin, unbelievable, brilliant people, Brian Feeney, who have all come together to start these conversations. And we, right up until the COVID-19 lockdown, we were hosting public meetings, and they were packed out, all over the country. And now they're online, and there's a huge interest in this conversation, and we have to really continue those conversations. And I would be very, very hopeful that already, I think, we're trying to get in to speak to government bodies to talk about how we can work together on this issue. But it is really, really important that we, do it very obviously. The conversation, we have to, invite all walks of life, all communities in to talk about what's going to happen with Brexit and talking about a shared Ireland.
I attended the conference that was held in the waterfront.
Mm.
You were there as well, I think.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it was a massive turnout. And
Yeah.
it wasn't the usual suspects. It was people from academia, people from the professions, people from the arts, people from all of that. And what struck me was the simplicity of let's talk. Let's just talk preconditions or without any preordained end result. And it just, again, this is an observation. What harm can it possibly do? It mightn't have all the answers, but certainly it's something that we all need to have an eye to and all of that. So
it's
I think you're
absolutely
right.
vital. It's 100% vital, and people want to talk about it. That's the problem. Like, that's the issue here. People want to talk about it, and sometimes, you know, I feel when you start talking about it, the fear comes in. Oh, we can, you know, we have to be careful. We have to do this, but we have to be open and honest. I mean, you could have said the same thing about, you know, the referendum that happened around marriage equality, you know, and women's rights issues, and, you know, so, like, you know, we have to start this conversation. We have to be brave. We have to talk about it. Let's look at it. Let's put all the cards out on the table, and let's see how we can plan and prepare for what it would look like, you know, economically, in so many different ways, you know, health, education, everything, you know.
I think sometimes, this is again an observation, but I think sometimes when governments, wherever they may be found, are trying to close down discussion, they describe it as dangerous or controversial or something that will upset someone. And I think we need to raise above that. We need to do all of that. But anyway, enough of that. We're really in our last 10 minutes, and I want to just touch on yet another project that you're heavily involved in. This month is designated Mental Health Month, and it's different dates for different reasons. And I know that you are passionate again about mental health, the examination of it and the help provided for it. So do you want to touch on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I've always been, you know, I went into Leinster House to really, I suppose, open up the conversation about mental health, and the urgency of funding needed. We now have a pandemic. I think everybody is impacted. I'd say most people are feeling the stress and anxiety of this pandemic. And then you have people who are losing their jobs or who are under threat of losing their jobs. You have people working at home who are in isolation. Now, some people might like that. You have the older generation whose families can't get to see them. I mean, you know, and children who can't, you know, young people who can't really go out and socialise, you know, they're getting criticised if they do. The pressure it's just off the Richter scale. And so I really wanted to, and I think there's going to be a huge surge of demands for mental health services in the next few months. And I think we have to be ready. So what I wanted to do then, and I've been working on this for the last couple of months, is to set up a formal cross-party Oireachtas committee on mental health. And, you know, there's a whole procedure around it, but I think we're almost there, Joe. So I was very lucky to be on the health committee, to be nominated to be on the health committee. And I think what we're hoping to do is have a subcommittee of the health committee working alongside the health committee, but prioritising mental health. You know, and when I say mental health, I mean across the board, you know, addiction services, you know, dual diagnosis, all the mental health services, to just work together and how we can try, honestly, and just get more funding. I mean, there's 80 million needed really to do a proper mental health, you know, service here in this country, and unfortunately there's nothing like that that's given to funding, you know. So people are tired, counsellors are tired, therapists are tired, they're stretched to the limit. We're at the moment inundated with people contacting the Rise Foundation. We don't have our programs, but we have phone calls, you know, we do online meetings. We had to take on 3 more therapists, you know, and bearing in mind we're not getting any funding. So that's another pressure on us to try and raise funds, and then we can't raise funds because there's no events, you know. So it's like a catch-22 situation. So look, all I want to do is just try and raise awareness and make mental health a priority. It should be up there with physical health. There should be no difference, you know. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Do you find because you haven't just came to this issue of mental health and mental health well-being. It's something that you've lobbied about and spoke about publicly and privately and all of that. Do you find, is it easier now to broach the subject of mental health? Is
Oh
it
yeah.
easier now for you to lobby because there's more awareness, because people are more perhaps honest about it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, people are, will listen to you and say, yeah, and nod your head. They'll nod their heads and go, yeah, I agree, I agree, I agree. But I don't know if there's been much shift in it, and that's my concern. Why, we don't have a proper strategy in Ireland around mental health. It shouldn't be rocket science. Do you know what I mean? It should be simple. Like, we have to prioritize it, because often mental health develops into physical health, and maybe if we went into that more intervention piece and caught it before it gets into that place of physical health and where it gets really bad, it just makes it simpler. And we have to look at more interventions, and we have to look at helping people and guiding them and giving them hope. And it doesn't, honestly, as a Rise Foundation therapist, all people want is to be heard and listened to and understood, and a bit of guidance on how to deal with this overwhelming feeling of, anxiety, stress, depression. It doesn't take much. You do have to have experience in it. But when you think of it, and you have to be obviously a skilled therapist, but it doesn't take much to hear people out and listen to people's stories and give them a bit of guidance on it. And we see it in Rise. We see people getting unbelievable recovery. If you have, maybe we just, for example, take a family where one of the parents is in addiction and the other one is so worried and stressed and uptight and depressed and constantly worrying about their loved one, they're not present to their children. So the children end up looking after each other. They're nearly ending up looking after the parent who's stressed, worrying about the parent who's in addiction. So, and then that's how it actually, that's how it goes through the family like wildfire. You take that parent, right, who's not in addiction but is absolutely crippled with depression and stress, and you work with them and you bring them into a recovery place where they can be more present to their children. Even if their loved one continues down that road of self-destruct, there you have one parent that's going to take care. So that's where the intervention piece. And often what happens is the loved one in addiction starts to want what that other parent has. Do you know what I mean? They want recovery themselves. They see the stress, they see the anxiety, they see all of that stuff. They're becoming normal again, and they want what they have, and they will follow suit. Now, I'm not saying it's guaranteed by any means, because addiction is a very insidious, very, very, detrimental disease, and it really does want people dead, to be honest with you. But we see recovery all the time, and it's not, it's easy to do. All we need is the resources.
And I think if you were providing nothing else but hope for people, the hope that it doesn't have to be like this, that there is a way out of it. Mm-hmm. We've been talking for an hour. Well, you've been talking for an hour now, hopefully. Listening a lot of that time. Well, 5 minutes. And you mentioned that you were, I don't know whether you're a granny, a grandmother, a mamo, I don't know. But
a mamo, yeah.
Mamo. So, and I know you dote on the two girls. I know you just kind of, they're the smartest children in Ireland, they're the best looking children in Ireland, and why wouldn't it be? So in the last couple of minutes, how do you relax whenever you get a chance to relax? What do you do to relax?
Joe, I love walking, and I feel blessed. There's one thing that I've gotten out of this pandemic, and I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but I kind of was fearful of doing it because I was worried about how I'm always working. But I got myself a dog, and he has just brought so much, I suppose, light and love into the house. And so, yeah, I go out walking with him. But what I really love to do, and if I've been really honest with you, is I love to get to Rathlin Island. That's where I am 100%.
I've seen you, I know.
It's just bring the dog up to Rathlin, and great if my family can come, and I love, you know, cooking and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and all you have to think about is what we're going to have for dinner today, and then you go walk in the fields and you go walk in the cliffs, and to me it's what and if my family are with me, it's pure heaven. So I haven't been to Rathlin this year because of the pandemic, Joe. I'm pining for it. I need to get up there soon. I hope, fingers crossed, I can get up in November, even just for a few days. But that's where I am totally and at one with myself. And maybe it's because all the ancestors are all up there, and, you know, I really feel I'm home when I'm on Rathlin.
I think every human being, be the Palestinians or Irish or wherever they come from, should have a piece of heaven.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
they should. So tell me, what do you call the dog?
Charlo. So
Charlo.
he's a rescue dog. He's a couple of years old. They called him Nico. So I said I wanted him to have. Charlo is where I'm from, Charlo, which is Charlemagne Street.
Yeah.
At Dubs we called it Charlo. And you know, and I wanted him. I didn't want to call him Nico. He didn't feel like a Nico to me. He feels like he's a Charlo dog. He's one of our own.
Francis, we're out of time. And I want to thank you, and I said it briefly and I said it flippantly, but I want to thank you for creating that hour for us today. I know you're busy, and I know an hour means that you got to catch up 2 hours later on. So from Scéalta, from me, Joe Austin, to Charlo, and to Francis Black, Coramila Mahagat, and thank you.
Coramila Mahagat, Joe, and you know I always would make time to talk to you. You're one in a million. Thanks a million. Gur Mahagat.